Beneath the quiet whisper of desert winds, a city sleeps, its secrets cradled in the arms of time. Baked earth walls where shadows once danced, streets where children's laughter echoed against the setting sun. Mohenjo-Daro, the mound of the dead, yet in this eternal silence lies not death, but dormant life. The weight of 5 millennia presses upon its bones, as dust from ancient fingerprints mingles with the sacred waters of the Indus. Here, where dreams were first housed in careful brick, where humanity first learned to live as one beneath shared skies. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The heartbeat of civilization, still pulsing beneath the sand, telling tales of beginnings so deep they touch the very soul of what we are. If this journey into history moves you, take a moment to like, share and subscribe. Let timeless stories find new hearts, just like yours. Long before the written records of history began, when much of the world still lived in scattered tribal communities, a magnificent civilization was flowering along the banks of the Indus River. In what is now Pakistan, in the fertile plains where water brought life to the earth, a people with remarkable vision and ingenuity began to build something unprecedented. This civilization, which would later be known as the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization, emerged from the mists of prehistoric time around 3300 BCE and would flourish for nearly 2,000 years. Among its greatest achievements was a city that stands as testament to their extraordinary advancement, Mohenjo-Daro. The story of Mohenjo-Daro begins with the land itself. The Indus River, flowing from the towering Himalayan mountains, carved its way through the landscape, depositing rich silt along its banks with each seasonal flood. This alluvial plain, stretching across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, created an environment where agriculture could flourish. The river's annual rhythms became the heartbeat of the civilization that would grow along its shores, providing water for crops, transportation for goods, and a central feature around which communities could organize themselves. The geography of this region shaped the character of the people who would eventually build Mohenjo-Daro. To the west rose the rugged Balochistan highlands, home to nomadic tribes and seasonal pastoralists. To the north stood the imposing Himalayas, a natural barrier that both protected and isolated. To the east lay the great Thar Desert, and to the south the Arabian Sea opened potential routes to distant lands. This diversity of landscapes created a crossroads where different cultures and ideas could meet, exchange, and transform. In this cradle of the Indus, early human settlements began to appear as early as 7000 BCE. The earliest inhabitants were simple farmers who had learned to cultivate wheat and barley, and to domesticate cattle, sheep, and goats. Over thousands of years, these scattered agricultural communities gradually grew more sophisticated, developing pottery, tools, and rudimentary trade networks. The gentle river plains encouraged cooperation rather than competition, as the abundant land could support growing populations without immediate resource conflicts. By around 5000 BCE, larger permanent villages were establishing themselves throughout the region. One such settlement was Mehrgarh, located west of the Indus in what is now Balochistan. This prehistoric community shows the gradual transition from simple farming villages to more complex societies. Archaeological evidence reveals increasingly sophisticated pottery, the emergence of craft specialization, and the first hints of trade networks that would eventually span thousands of miles. As the millennia passed, these communities continued to grow in complexity. By 3500 BCE, the stage was set for the emergence of true urbanism in the Indus Valley. The transition did not happen overnight. It was a gradual process spanning centuries. Small villages became towns, and some towns began to grow into cities. This was not merely a matter of increasing size, but represented fundamental changes in social organization, economic systems, and cultural development. What makes the emergence of the Indus Valley civilization particularly remarkable is that it appears to have developed largely indigenously, without significant influence from other major civilizations of the time. While Mesopotamia and Egypt were also developing urban centers during this period, the Indus civilization evolved with its own distinctive character, urban planning philosophy, and cultural expressions. By around 2600 BCE, this cultural evolution reached its zenith in what archaeologists call the mature Harappan period. It was during this golden age that Mohenjo-Daro rose to prominence as one of the largest and most sophisticated cities of the ancient world. Located on the right bank of the Indus River in what is now Pakistan's Sindh province, approximately 400 kilometers north of present-day Karachi, Mohenjo-Daro would become a marvel of ancient urban planning. The name Mohenjo-Daro is relatively modern, bestowed upon the ruins long after the city's abandonment. In the Sindhi language, it means mound of the dead, a fitting name for a place that lay buried and forgotten for thousands of years, its streets silent and its buildings empty, waiting to tell its story. What the original inhabitants called their city remains one of the many mysteries surrounding this ancient metropolis, as their writing system has yet to be fully deciphered. The river that gave life to this civilization was both a nurturing mother and unpredictable force. The Indus could bring fertility through its annual floods, depositing nutrient-rich silt across the floodplain, but it could also bring destruction when those floods exceeded their normal boundaries. Learning to live in harmony with this powerful waterway was one of the first great achievements of the people who would build Mohenjo-Daro. They developed sophisticated water management systems, including dams, reservoirs, and channels to control flooding and irrigation. They learned the rhythms of the river, planting and harvesting in synchronization with its annual cycle. This intimate relationship with water would later manifest in the advanced drainage systems of their cities and in the apparent reverence for water seen in structures like the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro. As the morning mist lifts from the waters of the ancient Indus, we can begin to see the outlines of something remarkable taking shape along its banks. Around 2600 BCE, when the Great Pyramids of Egypt were still relatively new and Stonehenge was under construction in distant Britain, the people of the Indus Valley were embarking on an urban experiment of unprecedented sophistication. They were building Mohenjo-Daro. The birth of this city did not happen in isolation. Throughout the Indus Valley, a pattern of urbanization was unfolding as villages grew into towns and towns evolved into cities. But Mohenjo-Daro would become something special, one of the largest and most advanced cities of its time, covering an area of more than 250 hectares and potentially housing up to 40,000 residents. What makes the emergence of Mohenjo-Daro particularly fascinating is the apparent planning that went into its construction. Unlike many ancient cities that grew organically over time in haphazard patterns, Mohenjo-Daro shows evidence of deliberate design from its earliest phases. The city's builders had a vision, a concept of urban living that emphasized order, cleanliness, and functionality. The first settlers at the site would have chosen the location carefully. Positioned on a series of mounds to elevate it above the floodplain of the Indus River, the site offered natural protection from seasonal flooding while maintaining easy access to the life-giving waters. The elevated position also provided a natural defensive advantage and allowed for the gentle breezes that would have made the hot climate more bearable. As workers gathered at the site, they brought with them a technology that would define the physical character of the city, the standardized fired brick. These bricks, remarkable for their consistency in size and quality, were typically 7x14x28 centimeters, with proportions of 1.24. This standardization speaks to a society with centralized organization and quality control. The bricks were fired in kilns to make them durable and resistant to the elements, a significant technological advancement over the sun-dried mud bricks used in many contemporary societies. With these reliable building materials, construction began in earnest. First came the foundations, thick platforms of mud brick to further elevate the structures above potential flood levels. On top of these, the city began to take shape according to a remarkably modern grid pattern. Streets were laid out in a precise north-south and east-west orientation, creating rectangular blocks within which buildings would be constructed. The main streets were impressive thoroughfares, some as wide as 10 meters, allowing for the efficient movement of people and goods throughout the city. These main arteries were intersected by smaller side streets and lanes, creating a hierarchical network of pathways that connected all parts of the urban landscape. This deliberate organization of space suggests a society with a strong sense of civic planning and possibly centralized authority. As the city grew, it developed into two distinct sections: a raised citadel or acropolis to the west, and a larger, lower city to the east. The citadel, standing approximately 12 meters above the surrounding plain, contained several significant public buildings and potentially administrative structures. Meanwhile, the lower city housed the majority of the population in densely packed residential blocks. As midday approaches and the sun intensifies, activity in the city shifts. Some residents might seek relief from the heat at the Great Bath, a remarkable structure in the citadel area of the city. This large pool, meticulously waterproofed with bitumen and accessed by wide steps, represents one of the most enigmatic features of Mohenjo-Daro. Was it a place for ritual purification, a public bathing facility, a center for civic ceremonies? The exact purpose remains unclear, but it clearly held great importance for the city's inhabitants and required significant communal investment to build and maintain. Adjacent to the Great Bath, other large structures on the citadel mound likely served important public functions. What archaeologists call the granary may have been used for storing grain reserves to guard against famine or as part of a system of taxation and redistribution. A large building identified as a possible assembly hall could have hosted gatherings of city leaders or public meetings. Other substantial buildings may have housed administrative functions. though in the absence of clear written records, their exact purposes remain subjects of scholarly interpretation. Social organization in Mohenjo-Daro appears to have differed from that of contemporaneous civilizations like Egypt and Mesopotamia. The absence of obvious palaces, temples, or royal tombs has led many scholars to suggest that the Indus civilization may not have been ruled by divine kings or dynastic pharaohs. Instead, some form of collective governance may have directed the affairs of the city, perhaps a council of elders or representatives of different social groups. The remarkable standardization seen throughout the city, in brick sizes, building layouts, weights and measures, and even artistic motifs, indicates strong civic organization and shared cultural values. The afternoon in Mohenjo-Daro might see children being instructed in crafts or other skills, merchants calculating their day's earnings using the standardized weight system, and continued activity in workshops throughout the city. As the worst heat of the day passes, the streets once again fill with people. Some might gather at public wells where water and news are both drawn and shared. Others might engage in games. Dice made from pottery and terracotta have been found, suggesting that games of chance were popular pastimes. Despite the rich archaeological evidence, the inner life of Mohenjo-Daro's inhabitants, their thoughts, beliefs, and spiritual practices remains somewhat elusive. The Indus script, found on thousands of small seals and tablets, has not been fully deciphered, leaving no direct written record of their ideas and values. However, certain artifacts offer tantalizing glimpses into their worldview. Figurines of women with elaborate headdresses suggest possible goddess worship, while depictions of horned figures seated in what appears to be a meditative posture hint at practices that may have influenced later Indian religious traditions. Natural elements, particularly animals like bulls, elephants, and tigers, as well as aquatic motifs, feature prominently in their artistic expressions, indicating a worldview deeply connected to the natural environment. Some scholars have identified possible continuities between Indus religious practices and later Hindu traditions, including an emphasis on ritual purification with water, reverence for certain animals, and possibly early forms of yoga practices. However, without deciphered texts, these connections remain speculative. As evening approaches, families gather in their courtyards for the final meal of the day. Oil lamps are lit as darkness falls, casting soft light on brick walls. Conversations flow. Children are put to bed, and gradually the city quiets. On rooftops and in courtyards, residents might gaze up at the same stars that still shine over the ruins today, contemplating their place in the cosmos. The night brings relative peace. To Mohenjo-Daro, though watchmen might patrol the streets, and the occasional barking of dogs breaks the silence. In homes throughout the city, people sleep on simple cots or mats, perhaps with coverings of cotton cloth during cooler seasons. Outside the city walls, the waters of the Indus continue their eternal flow, the lifeblood of this remarkable civilization. This daily rhythm of life, waking, working, eating, socializing, and sleeping, continued for generations in Mohenjo-Daro, across years that stretched into centuries. For roughly 700 years, from approximately 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE, the city flourished as a center of culture, craft, and commerce. Its citizens were heirs to a tradition of urban living that was already centuries old when Mohenjo-Daro reached its zenith, and they would pass this sophisticated urban culture on to subsequent generations. What makes Mohenjo-Daro truly remarkable is not just its age or size, but the quality of life it appears to have offered its inhabitants. In an era when many human societies were still living in small villages or as nomadic groups, and when other early cities often suffered from overcrowding, poor sanitation, and extreme social stratification, Mohenjo-Daro offered a notably different model of urban existence, one characterized by planning, infrastructure, relative comfort, and apparent social stability. As morning light filters through the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, it illuminates one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. A merchant carefully presses a small square seal into soft clay, leaving an impression of an elegant unicorn-like creature and a row of precise symbols. In this simple act lies one of archaeology's greatest puzzles, the undeciphered script of the Indus Valley Civilization. The writing system of Mohenjo-Daro represents both the civilization's remarkable achievement and one of our greatest barriers to understanding it fully. Unlike the hieroglyphs of Egypt or the cuneiform of Mesopotamia, which were deciphered in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the Indus script has stubbornly resisted complete translation despite decades of scholarly effort. This silence of the script means that, while we can observe the physical remains of Mohenjo-Daro in remarkable detail, we cannot hear the direct voices of its people. The script appears primarily on small seals, typically square in shape and made of steatite, soapstone, measuring about 1 inch across. These seals generally feature an animal or mythological figure carved in relief, with a line of text above. The most common animal depicted is the so-called unicorn, a single-horned bovine creature that may represent either a mythical beast or a stylized real animal seen in profile. Other seals depict tigers, elephants, rhinoceroses, crocodiles, and composite creatures that blend human and animal features. The script itself consists of between 400 and 600 distinct signs, depending on how variations are classified. This large number suggests that the Indus script was not a simple alphabet, but likely a logosyllabic system, where signs could represent either whole words or syllables. Most inscriptions are quite short, typically containing only 5 to 6 signs, with the longest known example having just 26 characters. This brevity has complicated decipherment efforts, as linguists have little extended text to work with. What purpose did these inscribed seals serve? The most widely accepted theory is that they were used in trade and administrative contexts, perhaps to mark ownership of goods or to authorize transactions. Many seals have a knob or boss on the reverse side, perforated with a hole through which a cord could be threaded, allowing the seal to be worn or carried. Impressions of these seals have been found on clay tags that were presumably attached to bundles of goods, supporting the idea that they functioned somewhat like modern signatures or commercial stamps. The precision with which the script was carved, often on tiny surfaces, speaks to the exceptional skill of Indus craftspeople and the importance placed on these objects. The consistency of the signs across hundreds of miles and over centuries indicates a standardized writing system that was widely shared throughout the civilization. This standardization is all the more remarkable given that it occurred in a pre-modern context without the benefit of printing technology or formal educational institutions as we would recognize them. In addition to seals, the Indus script appears on small tablets, pottery, tools, copper plates, and at least one large signboard that was found at the entrance to a building in Dholavira, another Indus city. The presence of the script in these various contexts suggests it may have served multiple functions beyond trade, possibly including religious, political, or commemorative purposes. Numerous attempts have been made to decipher the Indus script over the decades since its discovery. Early efforts often sought connections to known ancient languages of the region, such as Sanskrit or Dravidian language families. Some scholars have proposed that the script represents an early form of Dravidian, the language family that includes modern Tamil, Telugu, and other languages primarily spoken in southern India today. Others have suggested connections to Proto-Indo-European or even unrelated language groups. More recent approaches have employed computational methods, statistical analysis, and comparative linguistic techniques. Some researchers have identified patterns that suggest the script reads from right to left, while others have proposed values for certain signs based on their frequency and position within sequences. Despite these efforts, no consensus translation has emerged that satisfies the majority of scholars. The difficulty in deciphering the Indus script stems from several factors. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which provided a key to Egyptian hieroglyphs by presenting the same text in both hieroglyphs and known languages, no bilingual inscription has been found for the Indus script. Additionally, the brevity of most inscriptions limits the corpus of text available for analysis. Finally, uncertainty about which language the script records, whether an early form of Dravidian, Indo-Aryan, or some other language family altogether, complicates the search for linguistic patterns. What we can say with confidence is that the presence of writing indicates a society with administrative complexity, record-keeping needs, and likely some form of specialized scribal knowledge. The ability to write and read was probably confined to a specific group within society, merchants, administrators, or perhaps religious specialists. The script's standardization across the vast territory of the Indus civilization suggests centralized influence on cultural practices, if not direct political control. Beyond the formal script found on seals and other artifacts, the people of Mohenjo-Daro left other symbolic markings that offer glimpses into their thought world. Potter's marks on vessels, geometric patterns on bangles and ornaments, and painted motifs on pottery all formed part of a rich visual language that complemented the formal writing system. These symbols may have conveyed meaning even to those who could not read the script itself. As the midday sun rises higher over Mohenjo-Daro, casting shorter shadows across the gridded streets, we might imagine a scene at one of the city's craft workshops. A master artisan carefully carves a steatite seal using delicate metal tools to incise the mysterious symbols that will mark someone's identity or authority. Apprentices watch closely, learning not just the techniques of carving but the meaning of the symbols themselves. Knowledge passed from generation to generation through direct instruction rather than written manuals. In another part of the city, perhaps a merchant receives a shipment of goods from a distant trading partner. Breaking a clay seal on a container, he recognizes the symbols that identify the sender. A trusted associate from another Indus city hundreds of miles away. The shared writing system facilitates this long-distance commerce, creating bonds of trust and communication across vast distances. While the exact words and sounds of the Indus language remain elusive, the symbols themselves tell us something about what the people of Mohenjo-Daro valued and how they organized their world. The prominence of animal imagery suggests a society deeply connected to the natural world, while the precision of the carvings speaks to their technological skill and aesthetic sensibilities. The standardization of both the script and the objects on which it appears indicates a culture that valued order, consistency, and shared conventions. The silence of the script means that, paradoxically, we know both a great deal and very little about the people of Mohenjo-Daro. We can observe the physical structures they built, the objects they created, and the organization of their city in remarkable detail. Yet without access to their written records, we cannot know their names, their stories, their history as they understood it, or the specifics of their religious and philosophical ideas. We see the stage on which they lived their lives, but can only dimly perceive the drama that unfolded upon it. Perhaps someday a breakthrough will occur. A longer text might be discovered, or new methodologies might yield insights that finally unlock the secrets of the Indus script. Until then, the symbols remain elegant messengers from the past, recognized but not understood, their specific meanings hidden even as they testify to the sophistication of the civilization that created them. As evening shadows lengthen across Mohenjo-Daro, the script continues to speak its silent language through the artifacts that have survived the millennia. Though the specific meanings remain elusive, the existence of this writing system stands as testament to a sophisticated urban culture that flourished long before many other great civilizations had emerged. The mystery of the script serves as a humbling reminder of history's depth and the limitations of our knowledge. Some voices from the past still whisper in languages we cannot yet understand. The morning light filters through the narrow streets of Mohenjo-Daro, illuminating workshops where skilled artisans are already beginning their day's labor. In one corner, a craftsman carefully shapes a lump of clay on a pottery wheel, his hands steady and practiced from years of experience. Nearby, another artisan threads tiny carnelian beads onto a string, creating jewelry that will adorn the neck of a wealthy merchant or respected elder. The material culture of Mohenjo-Daro, the objects its people created and used, provides us with some of our most intimate connections to this ancient civilization. The pottery of Mohenjo-Daro reflects both technical mastery and aesthetic refinement. Using wheels to achieve symmetrical forms, potters created vessels in a wide variety of shapes suited to specific functions: storage jars for grain, cooking pots, water vessels, and serving dishes. The pottery was typically fired in kilns at controlled temperatures, producing durable wares with a distinctive reddish color. Many pieces were decorated with black painted designs, primarily geometric patterns, including intersecting circles, scales, and people leaf motifs, though some featured stylized animal or plant forms. What is particularly notable about Indus pottery is its remarkable consistency across the vast territory of the civilization. A pot made in Mohenjo-Daro would be nearly indistinguishable from one produced hundreds of miles away in Harappa or other major centers. This standardization speaks to shared cultural values, established traditions of craftsmanship, and extensive communication networks that maintained these consistent practices over generations. Among the most distinctive ceramic items produced in Mohenjo-Daro were small figurines, primarily of humans and animals. The human figurines, especially those depicting women, were often adorned with elaborate headdresses, jewelry, and belted garments. Their purpose remains uncertain. They may have served as toys, devotional objects, or representations of ancestors or deities. Animal figurines, including bulls, elephants, and birds, display a keen observation of natural forms and may have held symbolic or religious significance. Beyond ceramics, the people of Mohenjo-Daro worked with a variety of other materials, creating objects of both practical utility and artistic beauty. Stone was skillfully carved into utilitarian items like grinding stones and weights, as well as ornamental objects such as small sculptures and the intricate seals discussed earlier. The precision with which even the hardest stones were shaped indicates sophisticated tools and techniques, including drills capable of boring minute holes through beads of carnelian and other semi-precious stones. The stonework of Mohenjo-Daro is perhaps most impressive in its bead production. Beads of various shapes, disc-shaped, barrel-shaped, cylindrical, and spherical, were crafted from a wide range of materials, including carnelian, agate, jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and steatite. The manufacturing process was complex, involving multiple stages of shaping, polishing, and drilling. Carnelian beads often underwent a special heating process to deepen their red color, while others were etched with alkali to create white patterns against the red background, a technique requiring considerable chemical knowledge. These beads were strung into necklaces, bracelets, and other ornaments that served as both adornment and likely indicators of social status or identity. The discovery of bead workshops in the city, with tools and unfinished pieces, gives us insight into the production process and confirms that this was a specialized craft requiring years of training and experience to master. Metallurgy was another highly developed craft in Mohenjo-Daro. Copper and bronze were worked into tools, weapons, vessels, and ornaments. Gold and silver, though rarer, were fashioned into jewelry of remarkable delicacy. A hoard discovered at Mohenjo-Daro included necklaces of gold beads so precisely formed that they appear to have been created using standardized molds or templates. The metallurgical knowledge required to smelt, alloy, cast, and work these metals represents a sophisticated technological tradition. Among the most significant metal artifacts from Mohenjo-Daro are copper and bronze figurines. The most famous of these is the small bronze dancing girl, a nude female figure standing in a naturalistic pose with one arm bent and resting on her hip. Despite its small size, just over 4 inches tall, the figurine displays remarkable anatomical accuracy and a sense of movement that has led some scholars to describe it as one of the earliest examples of lost wax casting, showing contrapposto, a naturalistic stance with weight shifted to one leg. The textiles of Mohenjo-Daro have largely perished due to the tropical climate, but evidence of their production is abundant. Spindle whorls for spinning thread and possible loom weights suggest widespread textile manufacturing. Impressions of woven cloth on clay and metallurgical objects provide glimpses of the weaving techniques employed. Cotton was the primary fiber, used, and the Indus Valley people were among the earliest cultivators of this important plant. The discovery of dye vats suggests that fabrics were colored, though the specific patterns and designs remain unknown. Of particular significance in understanding the material culture of Mohenjo-Daro are the objects created for children. Clay carts with movable wheels, miniature pots and pans that mirror adult vessels, and small figurines that may have served as dolls all indicate a society that recognized childhood as a distinct phase of life and created specialized artifacts for it. The presence of board games and dice suggests leisure activities and the value placed on play and social interaction. The weights and measures used in Mohenjo-Daro deserve special attention as they represent one of the most standardized systems of the ancient world. Stone cubes and spheres in carefully graduated sizes have been found throughout the Indus region. The weights follow a binary system with ratios of 1.2.4, 8, 16, 32, etc., showing sophisticated mathematical understanding. Some weights were so precisely crafted that they vary from the standard by less than 1%, an extraordinary achievement for ancient technology. This standardization of weights across hundreds of miles suggests a shared economic system, and possibly some form of centralized authority that established and maintained these standards. For merchants traveling between cities, or for those engaged in long-distance trade, such consistency would have facilitated commerce and built trust in transactions. The tools used by the people of Mohenjo-Daro reflect practical ingenuity. Stone blades, often set into wooden or bone handles, served for cutting and processing food. Copper and bronze provided material for axes, adzes, chisels, and other implements used in woodworking and construction. Bone was fashioned into needles, awls, and other tools for working with textiles and leather. The overall impression is of a society well equipped with specialized tools for a wide range of productive activities. The material culture of Mohenjo-Daro also includes items that appear to have had ritual or spiritual significance. Small stone and metal objects that some archaeologists interpret as phallic symbols may have been associated with fertility cults. Terracotta figurines of seated figures in what appears to be yogic postures suggest possible religious practices. Certain vessels may have been used for ceremonial purposes rather than everyday activities. What is particularly striking about the artifacts of Mohenjo-Daro is their general high quality and wide distribution. Unlike some ancient societies where fine goods were limited to elites, it appears that many Mohenjo-Daro residents had access to well-made pottery, tools, and even some luxury items like beaded jewelry. This pattern suggests a society with relative prosperity and perhaps less extreme inequality than was common in some contemporaneous civilizations. As the day progresses in our imagined Mohenjo-Daro, the artistic output of the city continues to grow. A potter removes fired vessels from a kiln, their surfaces decorated with geometric designs that echo patterns used for generations. A metalsmith carefully polishes a copper mirror until it gleams in the sunlight. A beadmaker drills through a tiny piece of carnelian with remarkable precision, creating another component for an intricate necklace. In workshops and homes throughout the city, the material culture that would survive for millennia and eventually tell the story of this civilization to distant future generations is being created through the skilled hands of these anonymous artisans. The first light of dawn breaks over the eastern horizon, illuminating a small caravan approaching the gates of Mohenjo-Daro. Merchants lead pack animals laden with goods from distant regions, lapis lazuli from the mountains of Afghanistan, timber from the Himalayan foothills, shells from the coastal regions. At the same time, boats are being loaded at the riverside, docks with locally produced crafts and agricultural products bound for other settlements along the Indus and beyond. This constant flow of goods into and out of the city was the lifeblood of Mohenjo-Daro's economic existence, connecting it to a vast network of trade that stretched across the ancient world. The economy of Mohenjo-Daro rested on three primary foundations: agriculture, craft production, and trade. The fertile alluvial plains surrounding the city provided ideal conditions for farming, with annual floods replenishing the soil's nutrients. Wheat and barley were the staple crops, supplemented by pulses like chickpeas and lentils. Evidence suggests that rice may also have been cultivated, though to a lesser extent. This agricultural bounty provided the nutritional foundation that supported the city's large population and generated surpluses that could be stored, traded, or used to support specialists who did not directly produce food. Animal husbandry complemented crop agriculture with cattle, water buffalo, sheep, and goats providing meat, milk, leather, and wool. The importance of cattle in particular is reflected in their frequent depiction on seals and other artifacts. Fishing in the Indus River added another source of protein to the diet, while hunting may have supplemented food supplies and provided materials like horn, antler, and special hides. The agricultural hinterland of Mohenjo-Daro would have been dotted with smaller settlements and individual farmsteads, creating a mutually beneficial relationship between urban centre and rural periphery. Farmers brought their produce to city markets, receiving craft goods, processed materials, or perhaps specialised services in return. This urban-rural interaction formed the foundation of the regional economy and supported the dense concentration of population in the city itself. Within Mohenjo-Daro, craft production represented the second major economic sector. As we've seen, specialized artisans created pottery, beads, metal goods, textiles, and other products, often working in dedicated areas of the city. Archaeological evidence suggests that some neighborhoods may have specialized in particular crafts, creating zones of production within the urban landscape. The scale of production, particularly for items like beads and pottery, indicates that many craftspeople were producing not just for local consumption, but for export to other settlements. The organizational structure of craft production remains somewhat unclear. Some workshops appear to have been relatively small, perhaps family-based operations, while others may have been larger enterprises employing multiple workers. The remarkable standardization seen in many products suggests either strong craft, traditions passed from master to apprentice, or possibly some form of centralized oversight of production methods and quality control. Trade, the third pillar of Mohenjo-Daro's economy, operated at multiple scales, from local exchange within the city and its immediate hinterland to long-distance commerce connecting the Indus civilization with Mesopotamia and regions beyond. The city's position on the Indus River provided a natural transportation route, and archaeological evidence confirms that boats played a significant role in this trade network. Overland routes complemented riverine transportation, connecting Mohenjo-Daro to highland resource areas and to other urban centers. Local trade would have occurred in marketplaces, where farmers, fishers, and craftspeople gathered to exchange goods. While no physical structure has been definitively identified as a marketplace, open areas near major intersections in the city grid may have served this purpose. The standardized weights found throughout the city would have facilitated fair exchange, allowing quantities to be precisely measured and values calculated. Regional trade connected Mohenjo-Daro with other settlements of the Indus civilization, creating a network of economic interdependence that stretched across an area of approximately 680,000 square kilometers. This internal trade network moved not only goods, but ideas, technologies, and cultural practices throughout the region, contributing to the remarkable uniformity seen in Indus material culture. Long-distance trade extended the economic reach of Mohenjo-Daro far beyond the Indus Valley. Evidence of this extensive commerce comes from both the presence of exotic materials in Mohenjo-Daro and the discovery of Indus artifacts at distant sites. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turquoise from Iran, jade from Central Asia, and carnelian from Gujarat all found their way to the workshops and homes of Mohenjo-Daro. Meanwhile, distinctive Indus seals have been discovered in Mesopotamian cities, confirming direct or indirect contact between these great civilizations. Maritime trade appears to have been particularly significant, with coastal Indus settlements, like Lothal, serving as ports connecting the river-based network to sea routes in the Arabian Sea. Evidence suggests that Indus traders reached the Persian Gulf and Mesopotamia by sea, establishing what may have been one of the world's earliest long-distance maritime trade networks. Cuneiform texts from Mesopotamia mention a land called Meluha, which many scholars identify with the Indus region, describing it as a source of valuable materials including carnelian, ivory, and various woods. What did Mohenjo-Daro export in return for these imported luxuries? Agricultural products may have been one category, though these leave less archaeological evidence. Textiles, particularly fine cotton fabrics, were likely a significant export given the advanced state of textile production in the Indus region. Beads, especially the etched carnelian beads that required sophisticated manufacturing techniques, appear to have been valued throughout the ancient Near East. Ivory from Indian elephants, worked into ornaments and implements, has been found in Mesopotamian contexts and may have originated in the Indus region. The mechanisms of this long-distance trade remain somewhat mysterious. Did Indus merchants travel personally to distant markets, or did they work through intermediaries? Were there formal trade agreements between polities, or was commerce conducted primarily by independent entrepreneurs? Did specialized merchants focus on particular goods or routes, or were trading ventures more generalized? The limited textual evidence makes these questions difficult to answer definitively, though the standardized weights and distinctive seals suggest some degree of institutional framework for commercial activities. The economic life of Mohenjo-Daro also involves systems for storage and possibly redistribution of essential goods. The structure, often identified as the Great Granary in the Citadel area, a large platform with divisions for storing grain and evidence of air circulation to prevent spoilage, suggests centralized storage capacity. Whether this represents a governmental storehouse, a religious institution, a cooperative arrangement among merchants, or some other organizational form remains uncertain. However, its presence indicates planning for food security and possibly mechanisms for managing surpluses and scarcity. As midday approaches in our imagined Mohenjo-Daro, the economic pulse of the city quickens. In the marketplace, transactions multiply as households seek provisions for their daily needs. A potter trades a set of vessels for grain. A bead maker exchanges a finished necklace for metal tools from a smith. A merchant calculates values using the standardized weight system, placing small cubical weights on a balance to measure precisely the worth of goods being exchanged. At the river docks, larger-scale commerce unfolds as boats are loaded and unloaded. Workers carry baskets of grain onto watercraft bound for other cities. Bundles of imported materials are transported to workshops where they will be transformed into finished goods. Merchants apply their personal seals to clay tags attached to bundles of trade goods, marking ownership and perhaps authorizing the movement of these items through the commercial system. In the administrative areas, perhaps located in the citadel, records may have been kept on perishable materials that have not survived, cloth, palm leaves, or wooden tablets. Officials might have overseen certain aspects of economic activity, ensuring standards were maintained and possibly collecting levies or taxes to support public works and services. The exact nature of economic administration in Mohenjo-Daro remains speculative, but the scale and complexity of the city's infrastructure suggests some form of coordinated management. The economic system of Mohenjo-Daro supported a high standard of living by ancient standards. The quality of housing, the widespread distribution of well-made goods, and the substantial investment in public infrastructure all point to relative prosperity and effective resource management. The economy appears to have been remarkably stable. For centuries, adapting to challenges and maintaining its essential structures across many generations. As afternoon transitions toward evening in the bustling city, economic activity continues. Final transactions are completed in the marketplace as merchants prepare to secure their goods for the night. Craftspeople finish the day's work, setting aside projects to be resumed in the morning light. Farmers return to their outlying fields after selling their produce in the city. The interwoven economic activities that have sustained life in Mohenjo-Daro throughout the day begin to slow but never entirely cease. For commerce, like the Indus River itself, follows rhythms and cycles, but never truly stops flowing. As evening approaches, and the fierce sun begins to soften its glare over Mohenjo-Daro, families emerge onto rooftops and into courtyards, seeking cooler air and social connection. In one neighborhood, elders gather to discuss matters affecting the community. Elsewhere, a group performs what appears to be a ceremonial function, perhaps related to changing seasons or an important civic event. These quiet moments of collective life offer a window into one of the most intriguing aspects of Mohenjo-Daro, how its people organize themselves socially and politically. The social and political structure of Mohenjo-Daro presents one of the greatest puzzles in understanding this ancient civilization. Unlike many contemporaneous societies in Mesopotamia and Egypt, where clear evidence exists of powerful kings and elaborate palaces, the Indus civilization has yielded little definitive proof of strong centralized rulership. No obvious palaces have been identified. No royal tombs filled with treasures. No monumental inscriptions glorifying specific rulers or dynasties. and no clear depictions of individuals exercising royal authority. This absence of obvious markers of kingship has led some scholars to propose that the Indus civilization, including Mohenjo-Daro, may have operated under a different form of governance than the divine kingships or military elites common in other early civilizations. Various alternative models have been suggested, including rule by councils of elders, governance by merchant groups, priest-led administration, or various forms of collective leadership representing different components of society. The so-called priest-king statue discovered at Mohenjo-Daro, a small bearded figure carved from steatite, wearing a headband and a cloak decorated with trefoil patterns, was initially interpreted as representing a ruler combining political and religious authority. However, more recent scholarship has questioned this interpretation, noting that the figure bears no clear royal insignia. It may instead represent a priest, an elder, or simply a distinguished individual whose specific role cannot be determined from the sculpture alone. Despite the absence of clear evidence for monarchy, the sophisticated urban planning and standardization seen throughout Mohenjo-Daro and other Indus cities strongly suggests some form of central authority or coordinated governance. The grid-patterned streets, comprehensive drainage systems, standardized brick sizes, regulated weights and measures, and consistent artistic conventions all point to organizing principles that transcended individual preferences or local variations. 1. Possibility is that authority in Mohenjo-Daro was more institutionalized than personalized, vested in councils, assemblies, or civic bodies rather than individuals. Some large buildings in the citadel area may have served administrative functions, potentially hosting meetings of governing bodies or housing officials who oversaw aspects of city life. The apparent absence of extreme wealth disparities, as suggested by the relatively uniform housing quality, might indicate a society with more distributed authority rather than highly concentrated power. Religious institutions may have played a significant role in governance. The prominence of the Great Bath and other structures that appear to have had ceremonial functions suggests that religious practice was important to the community. In many ancient societies, temples and priestly classes served not only spiritual, but administrative functions, managing agricultural surpluses, organizing labor, and maintaining records. The Indus script, found primarily on seals that may have served administrative purposes, could have been the domain of a specialized class that combined religious and bureaucratic responsibilities. The apparent stability of Mohenjo-Daro over centuries indicates that whatever governance system existed was effective and resilient. The city shows remarkably little evidence of violent conflict or sudden political changes. No layers of destruction, no hasty rebuilding of defenses, no mass graves suggesting warfare or social upheaval. This stability suggests that the social contract binding the community together was largely successful in managing internal tensions and external challenges. Social stratification certainly existed in Mohenjo-Daro, though perhaps not to the extreme degree seen in some other ancient civilizations. Variations in house size and the distribution of luxury items like jewelry indicate differences in wealth and status. Craft specialization implies a division of labor, with some individuals spending their lives mastering particular skills while others engaged in food production or other basic economic activities. The presence of writing suggests literacy was probably limited to certain segments of society who required this skill for their specialized roles. Yet the overall impression from archaeological evidence is of a society with broad participation in its material benefits. The high quality of most housing, the widespread distribution of well-made goods, and the impressive public infrastructure that benefited the entire community all suggest a social system that distributed resources relatively evenly compared to the stark hierarchies often seen in ancient urban societies. The fundamental social unit was likely the family, with multiple generations often sharing a household. The prevalence of houses built around courtyards suggests an emphasis on family privacy and autonomy within the larger urban context. Extended family networks may have formed the basis for craft traditions, with specializations passing from one generation to the next, creating lineages of potters, bead makers, metalsmiths, and other skilled artisans. Beyond the family, neighborhood affiliations likely played an important role in social organization. The city's division into distinct blocks, often with their own wells and possibly small shrines, suggests that neighborhoods may have functioned as communities within the larger urban environment. Cooperation would have been necessary for maintaining shared infrastructure like drainage systems and streets, potentially fostering strong local identities and social bonds. The role of women in Mohenjo-Daro society remains somewhat unclear, though there are intriguing clues. The numerous female figurines discovered throughout the city suggest some form of feminine principle in religious practice. The dancing girl statuette depicts a confident female figure adorned with jewelry, indicating that women could hold positions of some status. The relatively standardized housing without obvious segregation of female quarters might suggest less rigid gender separation than in some later South Asian societies. Children appear to have been valued members of society, as evidenced by the creation of toys and games specifically for their use. The presence of miniature carts, animal figurines, and gaming pieces indicates recognition of childhood as a distinct life phase with its own material culture. Children likely participated in the economic life of the family from an early age, learning the skills they would need as adults through observation and gradually increasing participation in productive activities. As the evening deepens in Mohenjo-Daro, social activities continue. Families share meals in their courtyards. Neighbors gather at communal spaces, perhaps to exchange news or discuss matters of common concern. Somewhere, perhaps in a larger structure in the citadel area, individuals with civic responsibilities might be meeting to address issues affecting the wider community, planning infrastructure maintenance, organizing storage of grain reserves, or preparing for seasonal festivals. The elements of ritual and ceremony were woven throughout the social fabric of Mohenjo-Daro. While the exact nature of religious practices remains uncertain in the absence of decipherable texts, the archaeological evidence suggests that spiritual beliefs and observances were integral to the community's identity and cohesion. Figurines, ritual objects, and special structures like the Great Bath indicate shared beliefs that may have transcended neighborhood boundaries and united the city around common practices and understandings of the world. Social identities in Mohenjo-Daro were likely multifaceted, encompassing family lineage, occupational specialization, neighborhood affiliation, age, gender, and perhaps other dimensions not readily visible in the archaeological record. The interplay of these identities would have created a complex social landscape where individuals navigated multiple roles and relationships within the broader urban context. The stability of the city over centuries suggests that this social fabric was resilient, capable of absorbing tensions and adapting to changing circumstances without catastrophic disruption. As night falls completely over Mohenjo-Daro, oil lamps illuminate interiors where families prepare for sleep. The social bonds that have sustained the day's activities, cooperation among neighbors, exchanges between craftspeople and customers, the shared understanding of proper behavior in public spaces continue to bind the community together even as activity diminishes. In thousands of households across the city, people rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring another day of life in one of the ancient world's great urban achievements. A city whose social organization, whatever its exact nature, succeeded in creating order, prosperity, and remarkable stability in a time when such accomplishments were rare indeed. In the pre-dawn darkness, a figure moves silently through the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, carrying a small vessel of water. Reaching the Great Bath in the Citadel area, they descend the wide steps to perform ritual ablutions as the first hints of light touch the eastern horizon. This moment, bridging night and day, connecting the individual to sacred waters, captures something essential about the religious life of Mohenjo-Daro, a dimension of the civilization that remains one of its most intriguing yet elusive aspects. Unlike contemporary civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt, which left abundant textual and monumental evidence of their religious beliefs and practices, the Indus Valley people left no clearly decipherable religious texts and built no massive temples with explanatory inscriptions. Reconstructing their spiritual world requires careful interpretation of fragmentary evidence, figurines, seals, architectural spaces, burial practices, and objects that appear to have had ritual significance. The Great Bath stands as perhaps the most compelling evidence of institutionalized ritual practice in Mohenjo-Daro. This carefully constructed pool, approximately 12 meters north-south by 7 meters east-west and 2.4 meters deep, was built with extraordinary attention to waterproofing. Multiple layers of brick, bitumen, and timber created an impermeable basin that could hold water for extended periods. Two wide staircases on the northern and southern ends provided access to the water, while a small inlet allowed for filling, and a sophisticated drainage system permitted controlled emptying. The purpose of this monumental structure seems clearly connected to ritual bathing, though the specific beliefs underlying such practices remain speculative. Water has held profound religious significance in South Asian traditions throughout history, from ancient times to the present, representing purification, fertility, and the sacred power of rivers like the Indus and later the Ganges. The Great Bath may have been a place where citizens performed purification rituals, perhaps associated with seasonal festivals, life transitions, or regular devotional practices. Some scholars have suggested connections between the Great Bath and later Hindu practices of ritual bathing, seeing in this structure an early manifestation of beliefs and customs that would eventually evolve into classical Hinduism. Others caution against direct continuity theories, noting the vast temporal gap between the Indus civilization and the earliest clearly documented Hindu practices. The truth likely lies somewhere between these positions. The Great Bath representing indigenous religious traditions that may have influenced, but were not identical to, later South Asian spiritual systems. Beyond the Great Bath, several other structures in Mohenjo-Daro have been tentatively identified as having religious functions. Though these interpretations remain contested, a building containing a large circular brick platform has been suggested as a possible site for fire rituals, while various small chambers with special architectural features may have served as shrines or places for household worship. The iconography, found on seals and small sculptures, provides additional glimpses into the belief system of Mohenjo-Daro. One recurrent motif is a horned figure seated in what appears to be a yogic posture, often surrounded by animals. This proto-Shiva or Pashupati figure, lord of animals, has been interpreted by some scholars as an early form of the Hindu god Shiva, who in later tradition is associated with asceticism, yoga, and animal sovereignty. While direct continuity cannot be proven, the image suggests beliefs involving human-animal relationships, meditative practices, and possibly ascetic traditions that would resonate through later South Asian religious history. Animal imagery figures, prominently in the artistic and potentially religious expression of Mohenjo-Daro. The unicorn-like creature that appears on numerous seals remains enigmatic, but was clearly significant within the symbolic system of the culture. Bulls, elephants, tigers, and composite mythological creatures also feature in the iconography, suggesting that animals held important places in the cosmology and possibly the religious practices of the city's inhabitants. Female figurines found throughout Mohenjo-Daro have led some researchers to propose the existence of a goddess cult or beliefs centered on female fertility and regenerative power. These terracotta figurines, often depicting women with elaborate headdresses, jewelry, and emphasize sexual characteristics, may represent deities, ancestors, or participants in fertility rituals. The prevalence of these figurines in household contexts suggests they may have been associated with domestic religious practices rather than, or in addition to, official, institutional worship. Tree imagery, particularly what appears to be the pipal sacred fig tree, recurs in Indus art and may have had religious significance. In later South Asian traditions, this tree holds special sacred status, associated with wisdom, enlightenment, and divine presence. The appearance of people motifs on seals and pottery hints at an early form of tree veneration that would continue in various forms throughout the religious history of the region. Burial practices provide another window into the beliefs of Mohenjo-Daro's inhabitants. Unlike some contemporaneous civilizations that invested enormous resources in elaborate tombs and mortuary temples, the Indus people practiced relatively simple burial customs. Bodies were typically interred in a supine position, with the head to the north, accompanied by a few pottery vessels and occasionally personal ornaments like jewelry. This relative simplicity may reflect beliefs about the afterlife that did not emphasize material provisions for the deceased, or it might indicate that the most significant funerary rituals left few archaeological traces. The absence of monumental tombs for apparent elites is consistent with the general pattern of relatively muted status differentiation in Mohenjo-Daro. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs or Mesopotamian kings, whoever led or governed the Indus cities does not appear to have expressed their status through elaborate burial arrangements or massive funerary monuments. This suggests a religious worldview in which earthly status was not expected to translate directly into special treatment in death or the afterlife. Small objects found in households and workshops suggest that religious practice permeated daily life rather than being confined to special structures or formal occasions. Tiny figurines, miniature vessels that may have held offerings, and small ritual objects indicate that spiritual observances likely occurred regularly within domestic spaces. This integration of religious practice into everyday context points to a belief system embedded in daily experience rather than separated as a distinct domain of life. Fire altars discovered at various Indus sites suggest the ritual use of fire, possibly for offerings or purification ceremonies. Fire would later become central to Vedic religious practice, and while direct continuity cannot be established, these early fire-related rituals may represent indigenous traditions that eventually contributed elements to later South Asian religious developments. The complex symbolism on many Indus seals, combining animal imagery, abstract signs, and what appears to be writing, suggests a sophisticated cosmology with multiple levels of meaning. These small objects may have served not just administrative functions, but also talismanic or protective purposes, carrying spiritual significance alongside their practical uses in marking ownership or authorizing transactions. As the sun rises fully over Mohenjo-Daro, religious observances continue in various forms throughout the city. A household places a small offering before a figurine in a wall niche. A craftsperson performs a brief ritual before beginning the day's work, perhaps invoking protection or success. In the citadel area, more formal ceremonies might be conducted by individuals with specialized religious knowledge or authority, marking the rhythms of the day, the season, or significant communal events. The religious life of Mohenjo-Daro, pieced together from fragmentary evidence, appears to have been rich and multifaceted, integrating beliefs about purification, fertility, animal symbolism, and possibly meditative practices. While connections to later South Asian traditions remain speculative, the archaeological record suggests a spiritual foundation that valued order, continuity, and integration of sacred elements into everyday urban existence. In the absence of decipherable texts, the full richness of this belief system remains tantalizingly beyond our reach, but its importance to the citizens of this ancient city seems beyond doubt. Morning unfolds fully across the city of Mohenjo-Daro, revealing in the clear light the remarkable technological achievements that made this urban center possible. A woman draws water from a well constructed with precisely fitted bricks. Nearby, wastewater from a household flows into a covered drain that carries it toward the outskirts of the city. On a rooftop, a craftsman mixes carefully measured ingredients to create a durable mortar for construction. These everyday activities rest upon sophisticated technological foundations that distinguished Mohenjo-Daro as one of the most advanced settlements of its time. The most immediately visible technological achievement of Mohenjo-Daro was its urban planning and architecture. The city's grid pattern of streets, running north, south, and east-west to create organized residential blocks, represented a level of planning rarely seen in the ancient world. This was not a settlement that grew organically over time with winding, irregular pathways. It was a deliberately designed urban environment, implemented according to a coherent vision of city life. The structures of Mohenjo-Daro were built primarily of fired brick, a material that represented significant technological investment. The production of these bricks required carefully selected clay, sophisticated knowledge of firing temperatures, and substantial fuel resources. Most remarkable was the standardization of brick dimensions throughout the city and across the broader Indus region. Bricks typically followed a ratio of 4:1, length, width, height, though the actual sizes varied somewhat over time. This standardization facilitated construction techniques and likely reflected centralized direction or deeply established craft traditions. Architectural technologies included the use of gypsum mortar to bond bricks, techniques for constructing strong foundations to support multi-story structures, and methods for spanning openings using wooden beams. Builders incorporated features like air shafts and courtyards to improve ventilation in the hot climate, while thick walls provide insulation against both heat and cold. Staircases to roof levels created additional living and working space, effectively expanding the usable area of the relatively compact houses. Perhaps the most impressive technological achievement of Mohenjo-Daro was its sophisticated water management system. Clean water was provided through numerous wells distributed throughout the city, with many blocks having their own water source. These wells were constructed with tapered bricks, forming circular structures that extended to the water table, providing a reliable supply of fresh water even during seasonal fluctuations. Complementing the fresh water supply was an intricate drainage system that has few parallels in the ancient world. Most houses featured bathing areas where residents could wash themselves, with the wastewater flowing into a complex network of drains. Private drains connected to larger covered channels, running beneath the main streets, which in turn connected to even larger collectors. The entire system utilized gravity flow to carry wastewater outside the city limits, maintaining urban sanitation at a level not seen again in South Asia until the modern era. The sophistication of this drainage system is evident in numerous technical details: precisely laid bricks forming the channels, carefully calculated slopes to ensure proper flow, access points for maintenance and cleaning, and the integration of the system with the overall urban plan. The investment of resources and engineering knowledge in this infrastructure reflects a society that placed high value on cleanliness, public health, and efficient resource management. The Great Bath represents perhaps the pinnacle of Mohenjo-Daro's water technology. Its sophisticated construction included multiple layers of waterproofing, fine bricks laid with gypsum mortar, a thick layer of bitumen, natural tar, and a final layer of bricks set on edge. A wooden frame may have provided additional structural support. The bath featured an inlet for filling with fresh water and a sophisticated outlet connected to the main drainage system. Steps at either end allowed for easy access, while a small room adjacent to the bath may have housed the mechanism for controlling water flow. Metallurgical knowledge in Mohenjo-Daro was well developed, particularly for copper and bronze working. Artisans understood techniques for mining, smelting, alloying, casting, and finishing metals to create tools, weapons, vessels, and ornaments. The famous dancing girl bronze demonstrates mastery of the lost wax casting method, where a wax model is enclosed in clay then melted out and replaced with molten metal. Gold, silver, and lead were also worked using various techniques, creating objects of both practical utility and aesthetic beauty. Textile production represented another area of technological expertise. Despite the poor preservation of organic materials, archaeological evidence indicates sophisticated weaving techniques, primarily using cotton, one of the earliest known centers of cotton textile production. Spindle whorls for spinning thread, possible loom weights, and fabric impressions on clay and metal objects suggest widespread textile manufacturing using vertical looms. Dye vats indicate knowledge of coloring techniques, likely using plant-based pigments to create patterned and colored fabrics. Ceramic technology was highly developed, with potters using wheels to create symmetrical vessels of various forms and sizes. Kiln designs allowed for controlled firing at specific temperatures to achieve desired results. Higher temperatures for greater durability, lower temperatures for particular surface effects. Decoration techniques included applique, incision, painting, and possibly glazing, demonstrating both technical skill and aesthetic sophistication. Stoneworking technologies included precise drilling methods that allowed for the creation of beads with minute perforations, grinding techniques that achieved smooth surfaces on hard stone vessels and tools, and polishing methods that created lustrous finishes. Particularly impressive was the ability to drill holes through extremely hard stones like carnelian using specialized drill bits and abrasives, a technique requiring considerable skill and specialized knowledge. The weight system of Mohenjo-Daro represents one of the most precise measurement technologies of the ancient world. Carefully shaped cubical weights followed a binary ratio system, 1.2, 4, 8, 16, 32, with remarkable accuracy, some varying from the standard by less than 1%. This precision facilitated trade and other transactions requiring measured quantities, while the widespread distribution of identical weight standards across the Indus region suggests coordinated implementation of this important technology. Complementing the weight system were technologies for linear measurement, evidenced by standardized measuring tools and the precise dimensions of buildings and urban features. A small scale found at Mohenjo-Daro has markings that divide the unit into precise subunits, indicating sophisticated understanding of fractional measurement for construction and craft production. Agricultural technologies supported the city's large population, drawing on generations of accumulated knowledge about irrigation, crop selection, rotation practices, and food processing. Grinding stones, storage facilities, and specialized tools for harvesting and processing indicate a well-developed technological system for food production. The ability to generate agricultural surpluses was fundamental to supporting urban craft specialists and other non-food producers within the city. Transport technologies facilitated both local movement of goods and long-distance trade. Models of wheeled carts suggest the use of animal-drawn vehicles for overland transportation, while representations of boats indicate river and possibly sea travel. Docks and harbours at various Indus sites demonstrate the infrastructure necessary for water-based commerce, which likely formed the backbone of the civilization's extensive trade networks. As midday approaches in Mohenjo-Daro, the technological underpinnings of urban life continue their quiet functioning. Drains carrying away wastewater, wells providing fresh supplies, buildings offering shelter from the increasing heat, and various specialized tools enabling the work of craftspeople throughout the city. The citizens themselves might take these technical achievements for granted, having known no other way of life. But from our distant vantage point, the sophisticated technologies of Mohenjo-Daro represent a remarkable achievement of human ingenuity in creating a livable urban environment using the materials and knowledge available more than 4,000 years ago. As the midday sun climbs higher over Mohenjo-Daro, its inhabitants seek shelter from the heat, retreating to shaded courtyards, interior rooms with thick insulating walls, or rooftops covered with temporary awnings. This daily rhythm of adaptation to environmental conditions mirrors the larger relationship between the city and its natural surroundings, a complex interplay of accommodation, modification, and innovation that allowed this urban center to flourish in a challenging landscape. Mohenjo-Daro's location represents a carefully considered environmental choice. Situated on raised ground in the floodplain of the Indus River, the city benefited from proximity to water for transportation, daily use, and agriculture, while its elevated position provided protection against all but the most extreme floods. Archaeological evidence indicates that the settlement was initially established on natural high ground, with subsequent construction further raising the platform on which the city stood, suggesting an ongoing awareness of and response to environmental risks. The regional environment of Mohenjo-Daro during its heyday, approximately 2600–1900 BCE, differed somewhat from the conditions we observe today. Paleoenvironmental research suggests a slightly wetter climate with more consistent rainfall patterns. The Indus River likely flowed closer to the city than its current course, providing more immediate access to this crucial waterway. The surrounding landscape featured more extensive forests, providing timber, fuel, and wildlife habitat, though these resources were already under pressure from human exploitation. The seasonal rhythm of life in Mohenjo-Daro was dictated by the monsoon cycle and the annual flooding of the Indus. The river's floods brought nutrient-rich silt to agricultural lands, renewing soil fertility, but also posing risks to settlements. Evidence suggests that the Indus people carefully monitored flood patterns, constructing embankments and other protective features where necessary, and timing agricultural activities to coincide with the natural cycle of flooding and recession. Agriculture formed the foundation of Mohenjo-Daro's subsistence system, with fields surrounding the city producing wheat, barley, and various pulses as staple crops. These crops were well adapted to the local growing conditions, requiring relatively limited rainfall supplemented by river-based irrigation. Archaeological evidence indicates sophisticated water management for agriculture, including possible canals, embankments, and water-lifting devices that extended the productive capacity of the land beyond what would have been possible with rainfall alone. The domesticated animals of Mohenjo-Daro, primarily cattle, water buffalo, sheep, and goats, were similarly well suited to the local environment. These species could thrive on natural vegetation and agricultural byproducts, converting inedible plant matter into valuable protein, labor, and secondary products like milk and wool. The predominance of zebu cattle, Bos indicus, with their characteristic humps, reflects the adaptation of this species to the hot climate through enhanced heat regulation. The city's built environment demonstrates numerous adaptations to local climate conditions. Houses were constructed with thick walls that provided thermal mass, moderating temperature extremes by absorbing heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night. Narrow streets in residential areas created shade and channeled breezes. Courtyards within houses provided ventilation while offering protected outdoor space, and rooftops served as additional living areas, particularly during cooler evening hours. Water management represented perhaps the most significant environmental adaptation in Mohenjo-Daro. In a climate characterized by distinct wet and dry seasons, the reliable year-round water supply provided by wells was crucial to urban survival. The extensive drainage system protected the city from erosion during heavy monsoon rains while maintaining sanitary conditions. Water storage facilities may have helped bridge periods of scarcity, though these have proven difficult to identify with certainty in the archaeological record. The building materials of Mohenjo-Daro reflect careful selection, based on local environmental conditions and available resources. Fired bricks, though requiring significant fuel for production, proved far more durable in the alternating wet and dry conditions than sun-dried mud bricks. Timber, increasingly scarce as regional forests were harvested, was used selectively for structural elements where its properties were essential. Stone, which had to be imported from some distance, was reserved primarily for special applications like grinding implements, weights, and ornamental objects. Resource management appears to have been a significant concern for the inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro. The standardization of brick sizes may have represented not just quality control, but efficient use of materials. The careful maintenance of drainage systems prevented waste of structural materials through water damage. Specialized production areas for activities like metalworking and pottery firing suggest organized approaches to fuel consumption, concentrating heat-intensive industries where they could be most efficiently supplied and monitored. Environmental challenges certainly existed and were addressed through various adaptive strategies. The gradual deforestation of the surrounding region, evidenced by changes in wood species used in construction over time, appears to have prompted more efficient use of timber and possibly exploration of alternative materials. Changes in river course, a natural phenomenon in the dynamic Indus floodplain, necessitated modifications to water access systems and transportation routes. The food system of Mohenjo-Daro included strategies for managing environmental risk and uncertainty. Storage facilities for grain and other staples created buffers against poor harvests or supply disruptions. The cultivation of multiple crop species with different growing requirements spread the risk of crop failure due to specific weather conditions. Trade networks extended the resource base beyond the immediate region, providing access to materials and foods unavailable locally. The extensive trade connections of Mohenjo-Daro can themselves be viewed as an environmental adaptation strategy, allowing the city to overcome local resource limitations through exchange relationships. Materials like lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, timber from the Himalayas, and shells from the coast were brought to the city through these networks, greatly expanding the resource base available to its craftspeople and consumers. As the afternoon begins to cool and activity resumes in Mohenjo-Daro after the midday heat, The environmental adaptations that make this large urban settlement possible continue their quiet functioning. Wells provide water for household uses and craft production. Drainage channels carry away wastewater from bathing areas and streets. Thick walls maintain relatively comfortable interior temperatures despite external heat. These and countless other adaptations, developed over generations of urban living in this specific environmental context, form the foundation upon which daily life in the city unfolds. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across Mohenjo-Daro as the city's economic activities reach their peak intensity. Near the Western Gate, a group of merchants inspect a newly arrived shipment of goods: carnelian from Gujarat, timber from the foothills of the Himalayas, and shells from the distant coast. In workshops throughout the city, craftspeople transform raw materials into finished products, while in the residential quarters, household economies operate alongside the city's larger commercial systems. These interlocking activities form the economic foundation of Mohenjo-Daro, a complex web of production, exchange, and consumption that supported one of the ancient world's most sophisticated urban centers. The economy of Mohenjo-Daro rested primarily on agricultural production in the fertile Indus floodplain surrounding the city. The staple crops, wheat, barley, and various pulses, provided the nutritional base for the population, while generating surpluses that could support craft specialists, merchants, administrators, and others not directly engaged in food production. This agricultural abundance represented not just favorable environmental conditions, but generations of accumulated knowledge about irrigation techniques, crop selection, and land management practices that maximize productivity in this specific ecological context. Beyond the city walls stretched fields cultivated using flood retreat agriculture, where crops were planted as the annual inundation of the Indus River receded, taking advantage of the fresh deposit of fertile silt. This natural irrigation was likely supplemented by constructed water management systems, small canals, embankments, and possibly water-lifting devices that extended the productive capacity of the land. The coordination of these agricultural activities, particularly water allocation and harvest timing, may have been among the most important functions of whatever governance system operated in Mohenjo-Daro. Domesticated animals formed another pillar of the economic system. Cattle, particularly the zebu variety, well adapted to the local climate, provided not just meat and milk, but crucial labor for ploughing and transport. Sheep and goats offered additional sources of protein through meat and milk, while also providing wool and hair for textile production. Evidence from animal bones found in the city suggests specialized breeding programs and careful herd management to maintain these vital resources. Within the city itself, craft production represented a major economic sector. Archaeological evidence indicates numerous specialized industries, including pottery making, bead production, metalworking, textile manufacturing, and seal carving. These activities were not randomly distributed throughout the urban space, but appear to have been organized in specific neighborhoods or workshops, suggesting some degree of economic planning, or at least traditional spatial arrangements for particular crafts. The level of specialization in these industries points to craftspeople who devoted their full attention to particular products or production stages, rather than generalists producing a wide range of items. This specialization would have required reliable exchange systems to provide these non-agricultural producers with food and other necessities, highlighting the interdependence of the city's various economic sectors. Pottery production represents one of the best documented craft industries at Mohenjo-Daro. Excavations have revealed kilns, tools, raw materials, and of course abundant finished products, allowing reconstruction of the production process. Potters used wheels to create standardized vessels, fired them in kilns capable of reaching and maintaining specific temperatures, and often decorated them with distinctive red slips and black painted designs. The technological sophistication and standardization evident in Mohenjo-Daro pottery suggests well-established workshop traditions rather than household-level production. Bead making constituted another major industry, with workshops producing ornaments from a remarkable range of materials: carnelian, agate, lapis lazuli, steatite, faience, shell, and various metals. The production sequence for stone beads was particularly complex, involving specialized knowledge and tools for selecting materials, shaping, drilling, polishing, and in some cases applying heat treatments to enhance color. The famous carnelian factories of the Indus civilization demonstrate industrial-scale production with multiple specialists working on different stages of the manufacturing process. Metalworking in Mohenjo-Daro encompassed copper, bronze, gold, and silver, each requiring distinct technical knowledge and tools. Copper was alloyed with tin to produce bronze with superior hardness and durability for tools and weapons, while precious metals were worked into delicate jewelry using techniques like filigree, granulation, and lost wax casting. The spatial concentration of metal-related artifacts and production debris suggests specialized workshops, possibly organized around furnace facilities that required significant investment to construct and operate. Textile production appears to have been widespread, though direct evidence is limited by poor preservation of organic materials. Spindle whorls, possible loom weights, and impressions of woven fabrics on clay and metal objects indicate sophisticated weaving technology primarily using cotton. The discovery of dye vats suggests color production facilities, while depictions on seals and figurines show elaborate garments that would have required considerable skill to produce. The seal cutting industry produced one of the most distinctive artifacts of the Indus civilization: small, precisely carved steatite seals featuring animal motifs, particularly the enigmatic unicorn, and inscriptions in the still undeciphered Indus script. These seals, requiring exceptional skill to produce, appear to have functioned in administrative or commercial contexts, possibly marking ownership, authorizing transactions, or identifying specific individuals or groups within the economic system. Other specialized crafts included shellworking, stone carving, wooden object production, and the creation of faience, a quartz-based ceramic with a glazed surface. Each of these industries required specific technical knowledge, dedicated tools, reliable sources of raw materials, and established markets for the finished products, illustrating the complexity of the urban economic system. The organization of this craft production remains a subject of scholarly debate. Unlike contemporary Mesopotamian cities, Mohenjo-Daro has yielded limited evidence of large-scale institutional workshops attached to temples or palaces. Most production appears to have occurred in smaller workshops that may have been family-based enterprises, though operating within broadly standardized traditions that maintained consistent quality and style across the Indus region. Trade networks connected Mohenjo-Daro to resource areas and other settlements both within and beyond the Indus Valley. Raw materials not available locally, certain stones, metals, timber varieties, and marine products were brought to the city through these exchange relationships, while finished goods produced in Mohenjo-Daro workshops traveled outward to other markets. The extensive standardization of weights, measures, and certain artifact types across the Indus region suggests a high degree of economic integration, with relatively low barriers to exchange. Long-distance trade linked Mohenjo-Daro to cultures in Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf, Central Asia, and possibly the Gangetic Plain to the east. Archaeological evidence for these connections includes Indus seals found in Mesopotamian cities, Mesopotamian cylinder seals discovered at Indus sites, and mention of trade with Meluhha, likely the Indus region, in Mesopotamian texts. These exchanges may have been conducted by dedicated merchant groups who specialized in long-distance trade, possibly operating with some degree of independence from centralized authorities. The precise mechanisms of this trade remain uncertain. Unlike Mesopotamia, the Indus civilization has left no decipherable written records of commercial transactions, taxation, or economic administration. The relative uniformity of housing and burial practices suggests a society with less extreme wealth disparities than contemporary urban civilizations, raising questions about how economic surplus was distributed and controlled. One theory holds that Mohenjo-Daro operated under a system of corporate or collective governance rather than highly centralized rule, with various stakeholder groups, perhaps organized by occupation, kinship, or neighborhood, sharing authority and resources. In this model, trade might have been conducted through negotiated relationships between these groups rather than administered by a dominant palace or temple economy. The standardized weight system provides some of the strongest evidence for economic coordination across the Indus civilization. Small cubical weights following a consistent binary ratio progression have been found throughout the region, suggesting common systems of measurement that would have facilitated trade and exchange. Similarly, the widespread use of standardized brick dimensions and construction techniques indicates shared technological standards, if not centralized direction. As the economic functions of Mohenjo-Daro intertwined with its social and possibly religious dimensions, specialized spaces emerged that served multiple purposes. The warehouse area in the city's citadel region may have stored goods for redistribution, exchange, or communal use, while what appears to be a large public marketplace would have brought together producers and consumers in a space where social interactions and economic transactions reinforced community bonds. The evening approaches in Mohenjo-Daro, and economic activities begin to wind down for the day. Craftspeople put away their tools, merchants secure their goods, and the subtle rhythms of transaction and exchange that have animated the city since dawn gradually slow. Yet, even as visible commercial activity diminishes, the economic foundations of urban life remain: the stored food that will feed the population tomorrow, the goods that will be traded when markets reopen, the raw materials waiting to be transformed by skilled hands when morning comes again. In this complex web of production, exchange, and consumption lies the material foundation of Mohenjo-Daro's remarkable urban achievement. As twilight deepens over Mohenjo-Daro, oil lamps flicker to life in homes throughout the city, illuminating interior spaces where art and beauty were integral elements of daily life. A woman arranges flowers in a carefully crafted ceramic vessel, decorated with geometric patterns. Nearby, a man polishes a small bronze figurine until it gleams in the lamplight. On a shelf above, a steatite seal carved with the image of a unicorn-like creature catches the warm light. These objects, both practical and decorative, everyday and special, embody the aesthetic sensibilities of Mohenjo-Daro, a unique artistic tradition that combines technical precision with subtle expressiveness. The art of Mohenjo-Daro, unlike that of contemporary civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt, was not primarily monumental or heroic in character. There are no massive relief sculptures glorifying rulers, no colossal statues of gods or kings, no giant narrative friezes recording military conquests. Instead, the artistic expression of this civilization found voice primarily in smaller objects, seals, figurines, pottery, jewelry, and tools, where function and beauty were seamlessly integrated. This distinctive approach to visual culture reflected broader social patterns in the Indus civilization, where extreme centralization of power and wealth appears to have been less pronounced than in other early urban societies. The most iconic artistic objects from Mohenjo-Daro are undoubtedly the small steatite seals, typically measuring just a few centimeters square. These miniature masterpieces demonstrate extraordinary skill in both composition and execution. The most common motif is the unicorn, a one-horned animal depicted in profile with a peculiar tabular structure in front of it that may represent an offering stand or ritual object. Other seals feature bulls, elephants, rhinoceroses, tigers, composite mythological creatures, and human or deity figures, often accompanied by symbols from the undeciphered Indus script. The carving of these seals required exceptional technical ability, making precise incisions in the relatively soft steatite before firing hardened the material. The compositions show careful attention to balance, proportion, and the distinctive characteristics of each animal species. When pressed into clay, these seals created positive impressions, sealings, that were used in administrative or commercial contexts, though their significance almost certainly extended beyond mere functional applications into the realm of identity, status, and possibly religious symbolism. Figurative sculpture in Mohenjo-Daro took several forms, with terracotta being the most common medium. Thousands of small clay figurines have been recovered, many depicting female forms with elaborate headdresses and jewelry, emphasized physical characteristics, and distinct facial features. These mother goddesses, as they were initially called by early excavators, may represent deities, ancestors, or participants in fertility rituals. Their stylized forms, with pinched faces, bird-like features, and symbolically enhanced bodies, established a distinctive artistic vocabulary that persisted across generations of production. Male figures appear less frequently in the terracotta corpus, but demonstrate similar stylization, often wearing dhotis, cloth wrapped around the lower body, and displaying carefully modeled facial features. Animal figurines were also common, with cattle, dogs, birds, and monkeys among the most frequently depicted species. Some terracotta objects appear to be toys, small carts with movable wheels, rattles containing pellets, and animal figures that may have delighted the children of Mohenjo-Daro some 4 millennia ago. Stone sculpture, though less abundant than terracotta, includes some of the most sophisticated artistic expressions of civilization. The famous priest-king, or king-priest, as it is often called in Pakistan, is carved from steatite and depicts a bearded male figure wearing an elaborately patterned robe and a headband with a circular ornament at the center. Despite its small size, just 17.5 centimeters tall, this sculpture conveys dignity and presence through its carefully modeled features, upright posture, and serene expression. The figure's eyes, which may originally have been inlaid with shell or semi-precious stone, give the face a particularly lifelike quality. Another remarkable stone sculpture is the small bronze figure commonly known as the dancing girl, standing just 10.5 centimeters high. This casting depicts a young female figure standing with one arm akimbo and wearing nothing but a series of bangles on one arm and a necklace. The figure's confident posture and the sculptor's ability to convey a sense of movement and personality in such a small work demonstrates the sophisticated artistic sensibility of Mohenjo-Daro's metalworkers. The piece was created using the lost wax casting method, a complex technique requiring multiple stages and precise temperature control, further highlighting the integration of technical skill and aesthetic vision. Pottery from Mohenjo-Daro reveals another dimension of the city's artistic tradition. The wheel-thrown vessels, technically accomplished in their symmetry and proportions, often feature painted decorations in black on a red background. These designs include geometric patterns, floral motifs, and occasionally animal figures arranged in horizontal bands or panels. The painters demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of balance, rhythm, and visual harmony in these compositions, which follow consistent stylistic conventions while allowing for individual expression within the established tradition. The aesthetic of Mohenjo-Daro pottery emphasizes clean lines, balanced forms, and relatively restrained decoration, qualities that characterize much of the civilization's visual expression. Unlike the horror vacui, fear of empty space, evident in some ancient artistic traditions, Indus artists often allowed undecorated areas to play an active role in their compositions, creating a sense of spaciousness and calm that reflects the ordered nature of the city itself. Jewelry and personal adornment represented another significant arena for artistic expression in Mohenjo-Daro. Beads made from carnelian, agate, jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, faience, gold, and various other materials were crafted into necklaces, bracelets, and other ornaments. The technical challenges of drilling tiny holes through hard stone beads were overcome with remarkable precision, while the arrangement of beads in graduated sizes and alternating materials demonstrates sophisticated design sensibilities. Metal jewelry included gold fillets, headbands, earrings with complex granulation, work, finger rings, and amulets. These pieces combined precious materials with exceptional craftsmanship to create objects of both beauty and status. The preference for gold rather than silver in personal adornment may reflect both aesthetic preferences and the relative availability of these metals through trade networks. The architecture of Mohenjo-Daro, while primarily utilitarian in purpose, incorporated aesthetic principles in its precision, proportionality, and careful integration into the overall urban plan. The standardized brick dimensions created visual rhythm in walls and structures, while thoughtfully placed courtyards, entrances, and staircases enhanced the experience of moving through the built environment. Though largely undecorated compared to the architecture of contemporary civilizations, the city's buildings conveyed a sense of order, stability, and harmonious relationship with the surrounding landscape. Textiles, though rarely preserved in the archaeological record, were likely another important artistic medium in Mohenjo-Daro. Spindle whorls and possible loom weights suggest sophisticated weaving technology, while depictions of figures wearing patterned garments indicate that textile design was well developed. The hot climate would have favored lightweight cotton fabrics, possibly dyed with vegetable pigments to create colored patterns that complemented the other decorative arts of the civilization. When considered as a whole, the art of Mohenjo-Daro reveals a distinctive aesthetic characterized by precision, restraint, and integration of form and function. Unlike the monumental art programs of many ancient civilizations, which often glorified rulers or documented conquests, the artistic expression of the Indus people seems more concerned with creating objects of balanced beauty that enhanced everyday life and perhaps carried symbolic meanings within their belief system. The consistent artistic conventions across the Indus civilization suggest shared cultural values and aesthetic sensibilities, maintained over centuries and across a vast geographical area. This consistency reflects the remarkable coherence of Indus urban culture more generally, a society that appears to have valued order, standardization, and stability in multiple domains of life. As night fully descends on Mohenjo-Daro, the objects that fill its homes, vessels, figurines, beads, tools with decorative elements, continue to reflect the aesthetic vision of their makers. Though separated from us by more than 4 millennia, these artistic expressions speak of a society that valued beauty in daily life, technical excellence in craftsmanship, and distinctive visual forms that help define their cultural identity. In the flickering lamplight of a Mohenjo-Daro evening, art was not separate from life, but woven into its very fabric, functional, meaningful, and expressive of the values that sustained this remarkable urban civilization. Night has fallen completely over Mohenjo-Daro, an appropriate time to contemplate the eventual twilight and darkness that would come to this once thriving city. For all its remarkable achievements, the sophisticated urban planning, technological innovations, artistic traditions, and complex social organization, Mohenjo-Daro would eventually face challenges that its inhabitants could not overcome. The story of the city's decline and ultimate abandonment represents one of the most poignant chapters in its long history, a gradual process that transformed a vibrant urban center into silent ruins buried beneath layers of silt and sand. The decline of Mohenjo-Daro was not sudden or catastrophic, but appears to have unfolded over several centuries, beginning around 1900 BCE. Understanding this process requires examining multiple lines of evidence, architectural changes, shifts in material culture, environmental data, and patterns visible across the broader Indus civilization. What emerges is a complex picture of incremental change rather than dramatic collapse, suggesting that the people of Mohenjo-Daro faced mounting challenges with increasing difficulty until urban life there became unsustainable. Archaeological. Evidence from the later phases of Mohenjo-Daro reveals subtle but significant changes in the city's physical character. The meticulous urban planning that characterized earlier periods began to deteriorate, with new constructions sometimes encroaching on streets or blocking drainage channels. Buildings were subdivided into smaller units, possibly indicating population, pressure, or changes in family structure. Construction quality declined, with less attention to precise bricklaying and proper maintenance of existing structures. These changes suggest a gradual erosion of the social cohesion and administrative capacity that had maintained the city's orderly character for centuries. The drainage systems that had been so crucial to Mohenjo-Daro's success show signs of neglect in the final phases of occupation. Some channels were blocked or filled with debris, while others were repurposed or built over. The Great Bath, that remarkable feat of hydraulic engineering, appears to have fallen out of use before the city's final abandonment. These changes point to declining capacity to maintain the infrastructure that had made dense urban living possible, perhaps reflecting broader stresses on the society's organizational capabilities. Evidence from craft production shows similar patterns of change. The exquisite standardization seen in earlier periods in pottery forms, seal carving, bead production, and other industries became less consistent. While skilled craftsmanship continued in many areas, there appears to have been less rigid adherence to established conventions, suggesting weakening of the transmission systems that had maintained consistent traditions across generations. Some specialized crafts seem to have diminished in scale or disappeared entirely from the city. The abandonment of Mohenjo-Daro was not an isolated event, but part of a broader transformation across the entire Indus civilization. From approximately 1900 BCE onward, urban centers throughout the region show signs of stress and reorganization. Some were abandoned completely, while others continued with reduced populations or altered character. The remarkably integrated cultural system that had characterized the mature Harappan period began to fragment into more regionalized expressions, with local variations becoming more pronounced in material culture. Environmental factors likely played a significant role in these changes. Paleoclimatic research suggests that around 2200–2000 BCE, the region experienced a significant shift toward more arid conditions, with monsoon patterns becoming less reliable. This extended dry phase, which affected multiple ancient civilizations across Asia and the Mediterranean, would have placed stress on agricultural systems dependent on predictable rainfall and river flooding patterns. As crop yields became less reliable, the large urban populations would have faced increasing food security challenges. Changes in the Indus River itself may have directly affected Mohenjo-Daro. The river is known to have shifted course multiple times throughout history, a natural process in such dynamic floodplain environments. Archaeological evidence suggests that the river moved away from Mohenjo-Daro during its later phases, potentially reducing access to water for irrigation, transportation, and daily use. Alternatively, flooding patterns may have changed, becoming either more severe, increasing risk to the settlement, or less reliable, reducing agricultural productivity. Ecological degradation around the city likely compounded these challenges. Centuries of intensive agriculture, timber harvesting for construction and fuel, and exploitation of other natural resources would have transformed the local environment. Deforestation, soil salinization from irrigation, and depletion of wild resources could have created a gradually shrinking resource base, making it increasingly difficult to support the large urban population. While early excavators proposed invasion or violent destruction as the cause of Mohenjo-Daro's abandonment, subsequent research has largely discredited these theories. The massacre victims, once thought to provide evidence of violent conquest, have been reinterpreted as normal burials disrupted by later activities or natural processes. There is no compelling archaeological evidence for widespread destruction, burning, or the sudden replacement of Indus material culture with that of invaders. Trade networks that had connected Mohenjo-Daro to distant resource areas and markets appear to have weakened during this period. Changes in Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf region disrupted long-established exchange relationships, while shifting political and economic conditions within the Indus region itself may have altered internal trade patterns. For a city whose prosperity had been partly built on its position within extensive trade networks, these changes would have had significant economic impacts. Social and political factors, though difficult to discern in the absence of decipherable texts, likely contributed to the city's decline. Whatever governance systems had maintained order and coordinated activities in Mohenjo-Daro's heyday appear to have weakened over time. This may reflect internal tensions, challenges to traditional authority structures, or simply the cumulative effect of other stresses that made large-scale social coordination increasingly difficult to sustain. The process of abandonment itself appears to have been gradual rather than sudden. Certain neighborhoods were depopulated before others, with evidence suggesting that some areas of the city were already abandoned, while others continued to be occupied. This pattern suggests an incremental outmigration rather than a single catastrophic event that drove everyone away simultaneously. People may have left in family or community groups, seeking more favorable conditions elsewhere as urban life in Mohenjo-Daro became increasingly difficult. Where did the inhabitants go? Archaeological evidence suggests that many likely relocated to smaller settlements in the region, transitioning from urban to more rural lifeways. Some may have migrated to the emerging cultures of the Gangetic Plain to the east, potentially bringing Indus knowledge and traditions with them. Others may have remained in the general vicinity, adapting to changed environmental conditions with modified agricultural practices and settlement patterns. By approximately 1700 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro had been largely abandoned as a functioning city, though small-scale occupation may have continued in some areas for some time afterward. Nature began the slow process of reclaiming the urban landscape. Monsoon rains eroding exposed brick structures, wind-blown sand filling streets and rooms, vegetation taking root in abandoned courtyards. The Indus River's periodic flooding deposited layers of silt over the lowest portions of the site, gradually burying the remains of the once great city. The legacy of Mohenjo-Daro did not entirely disappear with its abandonment. Elements of Indus technology, artistic motifs, and possibly religious concepts appear to have influenced subsequent cultures in South Asia, though often transformed and adapted to new contexts. The knowledge of urban planning, water management, craft production techniques, and other achievements was likely carried by the descendants of Mohenjo-Daro's inhabitants into new cultural settings, becoming part of the foundation upon which later South Asian civilizations would build. As we imagine the final nights of Mohenjo-Daro as a living city, lamps growing fewer, streets emptier, the hum of activity diminishing year by year, we can envision families making difficult decisions to leave homes where perhaps their ancestors had lived for generations. They would have carried with them not just portable possessions, but knowledge, memories, traditions, and identities shaped by life in one of humanity's earliest great urban centers. In this way, though the physical city fell silent, something of its essence continued in the lives and practices of those who had once called it home. After its abandonment around 1700 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro entered a long period of silence, gradually fading from human memory. The empty streets that had once echoed with voices now heard only the whisper of wind and the gentle pattern of monsoon rains. The abandoned homes, shops, and public spaces, once filled with the vibrant activity of a thriving urban center, stood quiet and empty, their adobe walls slowly softening under the persistent forces of nature. Season after season, year after year, century after century, the elements worked their patient transformation on the forgotten city. The Indus River, which had been so central to the life and identity of Mohenjo-Daro, continued its ancient rhythms. Annual floods deposited layers of silt over the lower portions of the site, gradually burying the earliest chapters of the city's history beneath a protective blanket of earth. This natural preservation process would prove fortuitous for future generations seeking to understand this remarkable civilization, as objects and structures entombed in silt were shielded from more aggressive forms of deterioration. In other areas, particularly on the elevated mound that had once been the citadel, exposed structures gradually crumbled. Bricks loosened by plant roots and eroded by seasonal rains collapsed into heaps of rubble. The upper portions of walls fell first, followed eventually by their foundations. What had once been clearly defined buildings slowly transformed into amorphous mounds whose original forms became increasingly difficult to discern. As centuries passed, the memory of Mohenjo-Daro faded even from local traditions. Unlike sites like Babylon or Memphis, which remained known, if not continuously occupied, through written records and oral histories, Mohenjo-Daro and the broader Indus civilization slipped completely from human consciousness. No surviving texts mentioned the city by name. No legends preserved accounts of its grandeur. No maps marked its location. The very existence of this early urban society was forgotten, an entire chapter of human achievement temporarily erased from collective memory. Meanwhile, across the South Asian subcontinent, history continued its march. New civilizations rose in the Gangetic Plain to the east. The Vedic period gave way to the Mahajanapada era. The Mauryan Empire expanded and contracted. Religions were born and spread. Successive waves of migration, invasion, and cultural exchange transformed the human landscape of the region. Through all these changes, Mohenjo-Daro remained silent, its achievements unknown, its very existence unsuspected by the civilizations that followed. The region immediately surrounding the buried city was not continuously abandoned, however. Over the millennia, various communities established settlements in the vicinity, sometimes unknowingly building atop the concealed ruins. Buddhist stupas, dating to the 2nd century BCE, were constructed on the highest mounds, their builders unaware of the much older civilization whose remains lay beneath their feet. Later, During the Kushan period and subsequent eras, other structures were built in the area, each layer of occupation adding to the complex archaeological puzzle that would eventually challenge modern investigators. By the 19th century CE, the site of Mohenjo-Daro appeared as little more than a series of weathered mounds rising from the Sindh plain. Local populations called it Mohenjo-Daro, or Mound of the Dead, perhaps recognizing through oral tradition that these elevations were not natural features, but contained the remnants of an ancient past. Yet there was no understanding of what lay beneath the surface or the historical significance of these unassuming hills of earth and debris. While Mohenjo-Daro slumbered, the discipline of archaeology was developing half a world away. The excavations at Pompeii in the 18th century, Napoleon's scientific expedition to Egypt, and Heinrich Schliemann's work at Troy in the 19th century were establishing methods and principles for systematically uncovering and interpreting the material remains of past civilizations. These developments would eventually make it possible to rediscover and understand sites like Mohenjo-Daro, once modern archaeological attention turned to the Indian subcontinent. In the latter part of the 19th century, British colonial officials and scholars began to take note of the archaeological potential of various sites in what was then British India. Alexander Cunningham, the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, established in 1861, conducted preliminary investigations at numerous locations, though not yet at Mohenjo-Daro itself. These early efforts focused primarily on historical periods documented in written records, particularly sites associated with Buddhist and Hindu traditions. The turn of the 20th century brought increased archaeological activity throughout India, with more systematic approaches to excavation and recording. Scholars began to recognize that the subcontinent's history extended far deeper into the past than previously understood. Prehistoric stone tools discovered in various locations pushed the human timeline back thousands of years, while evidence of early farming communities suggested complex societies had existed long before the historically documented kingdoms and empires. It was against this background of expanding archaeological horizons that Mohenjo-Daro's long sleep approached its end. In the early 1920s, R.D. Banerjee, an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, visited the site while investigating Buddhist remains in the region. His trained eye recognized that the mounds at Mohenjo-Daro contained more than just Buddhist structures. They concealed something older, something potentially revolutionary for understanding South Asian prehistory. Initial excavations revealed tantalizing glimpses of an unknown civilization, standardized bricks, carefully planned structures, and artifacts unlike those of any previously documented South Asian culture. The discovery, roughly contemporaneous with similar findings at Harappa, some 400 miles to the north, would eventually revolutionize understanding of ancient South Asia and add an entirely new chapter to the story of early urbanization worldwide. The sleeping city was about to awaken in the global consciousness, not as a living entity, but as an archaeological wonder whose silent remains would speak volumes about a forgotten episode in human achievement. The long period of obscurity was ending, and Mohenjo-Daro was poised to reclaim its place in the human story, not as a functioning urban center, but as a window into a sophisticated ancient world previously unknown to modern scholarship. Yet even As Mohenjo-Daro prepared to emerge from its millennia of slumber, the city retained many of its secrets. The absence of deciphered written records meant that modern investigators would be limited in their understanding of many aspects of Indus society. The names the inhabitants called themselves, their language, the details of their belief systems, their political organization, all these would remain subjects of scholarly debate and speculation rather than certainty. In this way, despite its physical rediscovery, parts of Mohenjo-Daro would continue their long sleep, waiting perhaps for future breakthroughs to bring them fully into the light of modern understanding. The first light of modern rediscovery began to shine on Mohenjo-Daro in 1911, when an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India named Rai Bahadur Daya Ram Sahani noted the presence of unusual mounds near the Indus River in Sindh, in present-day Pakistan. However, it was R.D. Banerjee who brought more focused attention to the site in 1919-1920 during his investigation of a Buddhist stupa in the area. Banerjee's training allowed him to recognize the distinctive bricks and pottery fragments as evidence of a previously unknown ancient civilization. Initial excavations at the site in 1922 quickly revealed hints of something extraordinary. Carefully laid brick structures, evidence of sophisticated urban planning, and artifacts unlike those of any previously documented South Asian culture. Similar discoveries were taking place simultaneously at Harappa, several hundred miles to the north, suggesting not an isolated settlement, but an extensive civilization that had somehow slipped completely from historical memory. Word of these discoveries reached Sir John Marshall, then Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, who recognized their potential significance. Marshall organized more extensive excavations at both Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, beginning what would become one of the most important archaeological projects of the early 20th century. In 1924, he made the momentous public announcement that excavations in the Indus Valley had revealed evidence of a previously unknown civilization contemporary with those of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. The announcement sent shockwaves through the academic world, forcing a fundamental reconsideration of South Asian prehistory and early urbanization globally. Prevailing theories had suggested that Indian civilization largely developed from external influences, particularly from the West. The discovery of the sophisticated Indus cities, demonstrably older than the Aryan migrations described in Vedic texts, upended this narrative and established South Asia as an independent center of early urban development. Under Marshall's direction, large-scale excavations were conducted at Mohenjo-Daro between 1924 and 1931, primarily led by K.N. Dikshit, Mesvats, and Ernest Mackay. These campaigns revealed the remarkable urban planning, sophisticated hydraulic systems, and distinctive material culture that would come to define our understanding of the Indus civilization. Year by year, the sleeping city gradually emerged from its earthen tomb, revealing streets, houses, wells, drains, and public structures that had lain hidden for nearly 4 millennia. The excavators faced considerable challenges. The site was remote, and facilities were limited, making large-scale work difficult. The extreme climate of Sindh, with its blistering summer heat and periodic flooding, restricted excavation seasons and threatened both workers and artifacts. The high water table meant that deeper levels could not be easily investigated. Additionally, The very antiquity and unfamiliarity of what was being uncovered meant there were few precedents or parallels to guide interpretation. Nevertheless, the excavations progressed methodically, gradually exposing major areas of the ancient city. The elevated western mound, dubbed the Citadel by excavators, revealed the great bath, granary, assembly hall, and other structures that appear to have public functions. The larger lower town to the east yielded extensive residential neighborhoods with their remarkable standardized houses and sophisticated sanitation systems. As artifacts emerged from the earth, seals with their mysterious script, sophisticated pottery, elegant jewelry, precisely weighted stone cubes, figurines of various types, scholars began the complex task of interpreting this material culture. Without decipherable written records, each object became a potential key to understanding aspects of Indus life, faith, technology, and social organization. The wealth of material required specialized expertise for proper analysis. Marshall assembled a team of scholars with diverse skills to examine different aspects of the findings. Ernest Mackay focused on architectural features and urban planning, while Rai Bahadur Daya Ramsani and M.S. Vats documented the wide range of artifacts. Specialists from other fields were consulted on specific questions, such as the analysis of plant and animal remains and the geological context of the site. The publication of Marshall's landmark 3-volume work, Mohenjo-Daro and the Indus Civilization, in 1931 presented the first comprehensive account of the excavations and findings. This monumental publication established the fundamental framework for understanding the newly discovered civilization and remains a cornerstone reference for Indus studies to this day. Marshall's careful documentation preserved crucial information about the context and relationships of structures and artifacts that would prove invaluable to later generations of researchers. After the initial campaigns under Marshall's direction, excavations continued at Mohenjo-Daro under various leaders. From 1935 to 1936, Ernest Mackay conducted further investigations, particularly focusing on residential areas of the lower town. His meticulous recording of architectural details and artifact distributions added important dimensions to the understanding of everyday life in the ancient city. The approach of World War II and the subsequent partition of India and Pakistan in 1947 disrupted archaeological work at the site. When investigations resumed under the auspices of the newly formed government of Pakistan, they took place in a changed political and academic context. Sir Mortimer Wheeler, who served briefly as Director General of Archaeology in Pakistan, conducted important excavations at Mohenjo-Daro in 1950, bringing his influential methodological approach to the site. Wheeler's work emphasized stratigraphic excavation, carefully documenting the various layers of occupation to establish chronological relationships. His investigations helped refine the timeline of Mohenjo-Daro's development and decline, though some of his interpretations, particularly regarding the city's end, would later be reconsidered. Wheeler's dramatic suggestion that Mohenjo-Daro fell to violent invaders, the massacre in Mohenjo-Daro theory, captured public imagination, but has since been largely discredited by further archaeological evidence. In the decades following Pakistan's independence, Pakistani archaeologists took increasingly prominent roles in investigating their nation's ancient heritage. Notable among these was Muhammad Rafiq Mughal, whose work in the 1960s and beyond made significant contributions to understanding Mohenjo-Daro and the broader Indus civilization. International collaboration continued as well, with scholars from various countries contributing specialized expertise to specific research questions. The last major excavations at Mohenjo-Daro were conducted in the 1960s under the direction of George F. Dales from the University of California, Berkeley. After this point, focus shifted primarily from excavation to preservation, as concerns grew about the site's deterioration due to environmental factors and the effects of earlier excavation practices. The rising water table, soil salinity, and extreme temperature fluctuations were taking a toll on the exposed structures, creating an urgent need for conservation measures. In 1980, UNESCO added Mohenjo-Daro to its list of World Heritage Sites, recognizing its exceptional universal value as one of the earliest and most sophisticated urban centers in human history. This designation brought increased international attention to both the significance of the site and the challenges of preserving it for future generations. In the same year, UNESCO launched the International Safeguarding Campaign for Mohenjo-Daro, a major conservation initiative that would continue until 1997. The UNESCO campaign mobilized significant resources and expertise for preservation efforts. These included measures to combat soil salinity, control the water table, stabilize exposed structures, and develop better site management practices. Though challenges remain, this concerted international effort helped mitigate some of the most serious threats to Mohenjo-Daro's physical survival. Beyond physical excavation and conservation, the rediscovery of Mohenjo-Daro has continued through evolving scholarly interpretation and technological advances. Each generation of researchers has brought new questions, methods, and perspectives to the study of this ancient city. Aerial photography, satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and other non-invasive techniques have provided new ways of understanding the site without further excavation, while advanced analytical methods have extracted new information from previously recovered materials. Computer modeling has allowed virtual reconstructions of how Mohenjo-Daro might have appeared in its heyday, helping both scholars and the general public visualize this ancient urban landscape. DNA analysis of skeletal remains has offered insights into the genetic composition and relationships of the city's inhabitants. Paleo-environmental studies have helped reconstruct the ecological context in which Mohenjo-Daro developed and declined. The process of rediscovery has extended beyond academia into public consciousness. Museums in Pakistan, India, and around the world display artifacts from Mohenjo-Daro, allowing visitors to encounter tangible expressions of this ancient culture. Educational materials, documentaries, digital resources, and even creative works of literature and art have helped bring awareness of the Indus civilization to broader audiences. In this way, Mohenjo-Daro has been rediscovered not just as an archaeological site, but as a significant chapter in the human story. As dawn breaks over the ancient mounds of Mohenjo-Daro in the present day, the first rays of sunlight illuminate the weathered brick structures much as they did more than 4,000 years ago. Yet now these ruins stand as silent witnesses rather than components of a living city. The legacy of Mohenjo-Daro resides not in continued habitation, but in what this remarkable place reveals about human capability, ingenuity, and the deep patterns of urban development that continue to shape our world. The rediscovery of Mohenjo-Daro. fundamentally transformed our understanding of South Asian history and early urbanization globally. Before these excavations, conventional wisdom held that Indian civilization largely developed from external influences, particularly from the West. The sophisticated cities of the Indus established South Asia as an independent center of early urban development, contemporary with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia but following its own distinctive trajectory. This recognition has helped create a more balanced and accurate view of the multiple origins of complex societies around the world. For the nations of the Indian subcontinent, particularly Pakistan, where Mohenjo-Daro is located, the site represents a source of cultural pride and identity. It provides tangible evidence of the region's deep history of innovation and achievement, independent of later cultural developments. The image of the priest king appears on Pakistani currency and postage stamps, while motifs from Indus seals and pottery have been incorporated into modern design and artistic expression throughout South Asia. The urban planning principles demonstrated at Mohenjo-Daro represent one of its most significant legacies. The city's grid layout, efficient use of space, segregation of public and private spheres, and integration of residential areas with civic infrastructure all reflect sophisticated understanding of how built environments shape human experience. These principles have parallels in contemporary urban design, suggesting that certain fundamental aspects of organizing communal space transcend specific cultural and historical contexts. Perhaps most remarkable is Mohenjo-Daro's water management system, which established sanitation standards that would not be equaled in many parts of the world for thousands of years. The integration of private bathing areas, toilets, and drainage systems within individual homes, connected to larger networks of covered sewers, demonstrates a holistic approach to urban hygiene that has direct relevance to modern public health challenges. The Great Bath, with its sophisticated waterproofing and drainage systems, stands as a monument to the technical mastery of its builders. The standardization evident throughout Mohenjo-Daro, from the precisely dimensioned bricks to the carefully regulated weights and measures, suggests a society that valued order, consistency, and possibly equity. Unlike many other early urban civilizations, Mohenjo-Daro shows relatively modest differentiation in housing size and quality, suggesting less extreme social stratification. The apparent absence of royal palaces, monumental tombs, or grandiose temples challenges assumptions about the necessity of extreme hierarchy in early complex societies. The artistic legacy of Mohenjo-Daro offers insights into aesthetic sensibilities, quite different from those of contemporaneous civilizations. The miniature seal carvings, with their extraordinary precision and distinctive iconography, represent a unique artistic tradition that valued refined technical execution and symbolic communication. The famous dancing girl bronze demonstrates sophisticated metallurgical knowledge combined with keen observation of human form and movement. These and other artifacts speak to a society that integrated aesthetic considerations into functional objects and developed distinctive modes of visual expression. The mysterious Indus script, found on thousands of seals and other objects, but still undeciphered despite decades of scholarly effort, represents both a tantalizing puzzle and a reminder of the limitations of our knowledge. This writing system, one of the world's earliest, suggests a society with administrative needs complex enough to require written record-keeping. Yet its continued resistance to decipherment means many aspects of Indus culture remain beyond our grasp. The script stands as a humbling reminder that significant achievements of past civilizations may remain partially or wholly inaccessible to modern understanding. The ecological dimension of Mohenjo-Daro's story carries particular resonance in the contemporary world. The evidence suggesting that environmental changes, shifts in river courses, climate fluctuations, resource depletion, contributed to the city's decline offers sobering parallels to current concerns about climate change, water security, and sustainable resource management. The abandonment of this once thriving urban center reminds us that even sophisticated societies can face existential challenges when environmental conditions shift beyond their capacity to adapt. For archaeologists and historians, Mohenjo-Daro has served as both inspiration and methodological challenge. The site has spurred development of innovative approaches to investigating pre-literate societies, extracting maximum information from material remains in the absence of textual sources. The conservation challenges presented by the exposed ruins have similarly advanced practices in archaeological preservation, particularly in challenging environments. Each generation of researchers has brought new questions and techniques to the study of this ancient city, demonstrating archaeology's evolving capacity to illuminate the human past. The educational value of Mohenjo-Daro extends beyond specialized academic circles to broader public understanding. As one of the world's earliest examples of sophisticated urban planning, the site offers tangible evidence of humanity's long history of creating complex built environments. For students and visitors, encountering the physical remains of this ancient city provides a concrete connection to the deep human past that textbooks alone cannot offer. The continued preservation of Mohenjo-Daro faces significant challenges from both natural and human factors. The harsh climate of Sindh, with its extreme temperatures and seasonal flooding, takes a toll on the exposed structures. Rising groundwater levels and soil salinization threaten the very foundation of the site. Climate change may exacerbate these environmental pressures, as demonstrated by the severe flooding that damaged portions of the site in 2022. Human activities, from inappropriate tourism development to inadequate conservation resources, pose additional threats. Yet efforts to protect this irreplaceable heritage continue. The Pakistani government, UNESCO, and various international partners have invested in stabilization measures, drainage systems, protective structures, and site management planning. These efforts represent recognition of Mohenjo-Daro not as a national treasure alone, but as part of humanity's shared cultural heritage, a physical connection to our collective past that transcends modern political and cultural boundaries. Perhaps the most profound legacy of Mohenjo-Daro lies in what it reveals about human potential for creating ordered, functional communities at an urban scale. The city demonstrates that our ancestors of more than 4 millennia ago possessed not just technical skills, but sophisticated understanding of how to organize space, manage resources, facilitate trade, maintain public health, and coordinate the activities of thousands of individuals within a complex built environment. This achievement reminds us that the fundamental challenges of urban living, balancing density with livability, individual needs with communal welfare, growth with sustainability, have been with us since the earliest cities arose. In a world where more than half the global population now lives in cities, and urbanization continues to accelerate across developing regions, the example of Mohenjo-Daro offers both inspiration and caution. It shows what human ingenuity can accomplish in creating livable urban environments, even with technological means far simpler than those available today. Yet its eventual abandonment also reminds us of the precariousness of even the most impressive human achievements when faced with environmental changes and other systemic challenges. As the sun climbs higher in the sky above Mohenjo-Daro, tourists and pilgrims begin to arrive, walking pathways that follow the ancient street grid. Some are drawn by academic interest, others by cultural heritage, still others by simple curiosity about this remarkable place. Each visitor becomes part of the ongoing story of Mohenjo-Daro, not as residents of a living city, but as witnesses to an enduring testimony of human achievement. In their footsteps, in their wonder, in their questions and reflections, the legacy of this ancient place continues to unfold across time. Time flows like the ancient Indus, carrying away the voices and footsteps of those who once walked these streets of fired brick. Yet something remains, something more permanent than flesh or memory. In the geometric precision of these walls, in the patient wisdom of these drains, in the silent eloquence of these artifacts, the essence of Mohenjo-Daro endures. The desert winds have scoured these stones for 4 millennia, yet they stand. Monsoon rains have sought to dissolve this testament, yet it remains. The river that gave life has changed its course. Forests have retreated, empires have risen and crumbled to dust, yet these humble bricks still speak their truth. What whispers? Here is not the glory of conquest or the vanity of kings, but the quiet dignity of a people who understood how to live together with grace. The dancing girl still dances, frozen in bronze but alive in spirit. The unicorn seals still tell their cryptic stories. The waters of the great bath still shimmer in my memory's eye. As stars wheel above these silent streets, the same stars that watched over the city in its prime, Mohenjo-Daro reminds us that we are all just passing through. Civilizations, like individuals, have their season. Yet in the patterns we create, in the structures we build, in the beauty we shape from earth and water and fire, something transcends our brief moment. Something flows like the eternal river, connecting those who came before to those who will follow, carrying forward the endless human story beneath the patient, watching sky.